some major supermarkets. But standing out from the herd means processing and distributing all of its own products, mostly here in the local area.
So on farm we have obviously milking parlour, we have 150 cows in milk, and then we have our production room. And in our production room we have a pasteuriser, we have a butter churn, we're able to make cream, yoghurt, we make our very own kefir, and we've also just opened our cheese room.
Now you can buy milk from vending machines like this 24 hours a day. Or if you prefer a bit of chat, you can pick it up in the village shop. But could this model really work in every town and city? That's the view of Rex's MP, who says some disruption to supermarket supply chains could be a good thing.
Some people say that's a problem. I believe that's the biggest and best opportunity that our farmers have had for a very, very long time. And that is because it's putting pressure on a very centralised, very commercialised supply chain that provides the supermarkets with considerable profit. And our farmers, as indeed such dairies in my constituency, such as Hollis Mead and others, now sell their milk on the doorstep, almost literally.
So how would collapsing supermarkets impact prices?
The best we could hope for is that prices would go up, I would say, very substantially. The worst we could expect is, it was something that would make the recent petrol crisis look fairly minor, really. So, civil and economic disorder.
While Rex accepts that customers would pay more, he thinks it could be worth it to cut food miles and create local jobs.
Pre the war, we paid something like a third of our income on food. Now it's less than 10%. We've got to respect that there is a cost to our obsession with cheap food, and that cost is nature.
The British Retail Consortium says supermarkets have brought down prices and increased consumer choice. It says more short-term visas are needed for HGV drivers to ease pressure on the system.
Right, Mel, amidst all of these fears and warnings from the industry, what about this counterintuitive suggestion that some of this could actually present an opportunity for the farming industry?
Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say that with every change there's opportunity, but what we don't need in our complex food systems at a really volatile time is more vulnerability and more shocks to the system. What we want is to work with our government, with our politicians, with our retailers, and all the parts in between to find good solutions to the current challenges that we're facing, because these are having an impact on not only our supply chains and those people that work and live in the countryside, but also further up that supply chain with our processors who provide lots of jobs, who are facing also increasing costs. But these are family farms, and these are people and livelihoods that it's affecting right now. Always farmers will be resilient and stoic. They want to do a great job producing great food, but they do need to have the right confidence and the right structures in place to be able to, really build resilience into their businesses to deliver for what society needs now. So right now, we don't need more shocks to our system, but we're absolutely up for looking at those opportunities, as you've just, seen and highlighted, and we've got many more that we could do the same with as well.
And given, clearly there are global issues at the moment, not least the impact of COVID. Is your view that the government's rather making things worse, a bad situation worse?
I think they could help a lot more. And I think we really want to be able to engage in a positive way to find solutions to the current challenges. We saw the vulnerability in our food systems during those early times of COVID. We're seeing them now where we're purely moving people from one part of a sector to another. All business, not just farming and food systems, are affected by the challenges of not enough labour provision in this country. And it's about skilled and unskilled. Some of the work that we're looking at in our food systems are highly well-paid, skilled jobs. We just don't have enough people to do them.
Right, Phil, what do you make of Chris Loder's suggestion that this could be turned to the farmers' advantage, and the government's general approach to this?
don't go to the advantage of hard-working people who are basically, if you're on universal credit, going to find yourself £86 a month worse off. That's a weekly shop. That's a weekly shop. And I went to the supermarket today for a pint of milk and it was 85 pence. And now we're telling these same people to go and buy a pint of milk for £1.50. They're having their national insurance contributions go up, they're going to have their fuel bills go up, and we say this is a good thing that you're now expected to pay more for your food. So what's going wrong here is there was a lack of a plan by central government. So this is the consequence of them saying, let's take back control, and it just jingoism. Now what we've got to do is we need labour, we need that fast, and the only way to do that is to allow labour back in to help support our industries and jobs. But you know what I will end on saying is we've got the worst of both worlds now. Those who voted to take back control and therefore wanted to stop immigration and you didn't want a customs deal because of that, you've got the worst of it. You've got the immigration without the customs deal.
Now, Neil, you monitor all this kind of thing very closely in your role as chair of the Commons Environment Committee. What do you think of this suggestion from Chris Loder, your colleague, that in some ways the disruption to supply chains could be advantageous to farmers?
I think it's great that farmers can tap into selling directly to the public. But what you've got to remember, it's probably only 2, 3, 5% of the market. If we could go up to 10, that would be great. So we do actually need the food chain to work, and that is where, getting the labour, getting the processing done, be it pork, be it poultry, be it milk, is so important. So we do actually need, and I think, George Eustace, Environment Secretary, is now saying, let's actually have a more open policy to allow more workers in to make sure we can process our food, our chickens, our pigs, and our milk, and then train up our own labour into the future. Because otherwise, our supermarkets are going to be stocked with foreign produce, which is not being produced to higher standard, and there's going to be a real problem. So, I want action. I want it now. We're going to have an inquiry in the Select Committee now on the 26th of October, and I really want something done right away. Written to the Prime Minister, written to the Home Secretary. It is really necessary now to have both, farmers selling directly to the public, but also having our retail sector work well with enough labour and processing to do it properly, so we've got a cost-effective system where everybody can afford to buy milk and meat and cheese into the future.
Okay, you mentioned the pork sector, and of course there is particular focus at the moment on the shortage of pig processors and the risk of thousands of pigs having to be culled. Here's a little bit of the Prime Minister's response when this issue was put to him by Andrew Marr.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Andrew, but I'm afraid that our food processing industry does involve the killing a lot of animals, and that is
butchering them and then selling them for food. But that's not what we're talking about.
That is the reality. I think people, your viewers, need to understand that. That's just what happens.
So when people see pictures of all those pigs being killed in farms and incinerated rather than being sold for food, sausages.
So they're also going to be killed. I think people need to understand. Before you try to obfuscate this point, the fact is, Andrew, that whatever happens to.
So it's fairly straightforward. The farmer.
Mel, what do you make of that response? The argument basically being that the pigs will be killed anyway.
I think the farming fraternity were quite shocked with that response. Clearly, we all understand what needs to happen in our food systems. What we desperately need, and what felt undermined in that response, was that we've got an incredibly difficult situation on our hands. We can't see wasted food produced to the highest standard in the world. And we're seeking to work with government to support us to find a really workable solution really fast. This is livelihoods, this is people, family farms, under contract, having the rug pulled out under their feet, facing huge losses, and really staring down literally the barrel of a gun with financial crisis too. So I think that response was not welcome by the industry, and we really hope that we can move to a more satisfactory and supportive place, which doesn't undermine our food systems, as Neil has mentioned. We just then run the risk of exporting our standards, our credentials, and indeed some of our environmental credentials to other parts of the world where we wouldn't be satisfied with that in this country. So I really hope that we move to a positive solution very soon.
Neil, were you shocked, taken aback by that response?
I think the Prime Minister didn't pick up the question in the right way, and so therefore sort of came wrong-footed by it. And so the conversation that I've had post to number 10 now is that they are looking very, very clearly now at having enough labour, enough butchers, and actually get these animals slaughtered at the slaughterhouses, because the last thing we want is them to be slaughtered on farm. We're also killing off, if we're not at all careful, our breeding stock as well. And there is a real issue here that we have brought home very clearly to the Prime Minister, and I believe you will see a solution to this very soon. I don't think we should have got into such a short supply of labour as we have, but I think we need to act quickly and we need to act now. And I hope that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister will come up with the right solutions where we can let the labour in for the time being, limited, and then train up good butchers and others, because it's not that, they're good salaried butchers, and so it's not a lack of money, it's a lack of expertise to actually do this value added to the carcass. So I'm looking forward to us doing it.
Okay, and Phil, maybe some final thoughts from you on this. I mean, certainly wasn't the case 20 years ago that the Labour Prime Minister was telling the cattle farmers seeing their animals being culled and incinerated that they'd be killed anyway.
No, look, it was painful to watch when I first watched it, and it was equally as painful to watch it another time, just a moment ago. He doesn't know what he's talking about. They haven't got a clue. What Neil is saying is he's trying to help him out, but what Neil is saying is, I think he's saying we should have had a longer transition period on leaving the economic union. That's what we should have had, and then we can put all these processes in place. But no, government wanted to take control, Freedom Day, and actually they've now got to put up with it. They need to work doubly hard now, because in one breath we're talking about putting the price of food up, and yet we're going to be throwing food away. It's absolutely appalling.
Okay, thank you. Now, 3 places in the region have secured £1 million of government funding to make streets safer and tackle violence against women. It follows the recent conviction of a Metropolitan Police officer for the murder of Sarah Everard in March, a crime which shocked the nation. The money's been awarded to Plymouth, Weymouth and Falmouth to install CCTV and improve street lighting. But while it's been welcomed, there are calls for the government to go further. I spoke to Caroline Voden, CEO of Devon Rape Crisis and Sexual Abuse Services.
Well, we keep hearing senior politicians saying, we need to understand what went wrong and we need to make sure this never happens again, and words to that effect. And I don't think it's rocket science, really, to know why these things happen and why they keep happening. I mean, like I said in the piece I wrote earlier this week, we live in a very misogynistic culture, and it's okay to be misogynistic. It's accepted. And there is a whole spectrum from what some people would just consider a bit of harmless banter right through to really serious sexual assaults. And if that behaviour is not nipped in the bud, if boys and young men are not taught that it's not okay to objectify women and to touch them when they haven't been asked to be touched, and to shout at them in the street and to call them names and to talk about their bodies and all that kind of stuff, if that isn't nipped in the bud at a young age, then it becomes embedded and they think it's okay, and that behaviour can get much worse. Now, what we never hear from anybody in any position of authority is that, A, this is not just a woman's problem, this is a problem for the whole of society, and B, we need to start addressing it. We need to look at education and prevention, because we need to change the culture. And that's what we're not hearing.
And I think your charity has received a huge number of calls since the Sarah Everard trial.
It really has, yes. So in March, we saw a huge uplift in calls when Sarah's death was reported, and it was all over the media. It was really, really difficult for people, and it died down a little bit. And then last week, September was our second highest month ever after March this year for referrals, and we noticed a huge spike over a couple of days when hearing the statements from Sarah's family in court. I found it too distressing. It was just too much. And I think, for any woman who's been a victim of sexual violence, having that sort of constant conversation going on all around on TV and radio is really, really difficult. And people are phoning us for support. And we are overwhelmed.
What do you make of some of the so-called and widely criticised practical advice offered from the highest levels in the police? So, for instance, the suggestion that you could hail a bus if you're in that situation, or that you should be better genned up on the rules surrounding arrest.
Well, excuse me for laughing, but you and I both live in Devon, and if you were going to hail a bus where I live, you might have to wait 2 days before a bus came past. So, not only is it a very London-centric thing to say, but it's absolutely ludicrous, and to expect a woman who is stopped by a policeman in uniform to start questioning that policeman about his credentials, it's just so out of touch, and it's insulting that yet again it's the onus is being put on the woman to keep herself safe.
And I seem to remember comments from a judge 20, 30 years ago along those lines, at the time being widely slated. Has much changed?
I really don't think it has. I really don't think it has. I mean, that comment about the bus was just showed. I mean, we had Dominic Raab, the Justice Secretary, yesterday, didn't even know the meaning of the word misogyny. I mean, how are we really ever going to improve this problem if we've got people at the top of government who don't even know what misogyny is? And our Minister for Women and Equalities has that tacked on to the brief of being Foreign Minister. I mean, they say that being Foreign Minister is one of the big three ministries of state. So how does she have time to tack on a bit of women and equalities onto the back of that? That just shows what importance they give to it as an issue.
Mel, does any of that resonate with you?
Well, I think it does, in a sense of being a mother to my young daughter. I absolutely agree that we need to make sure that young people are educated to understand what this is all about, to ensure that young men are growing up to respect the positions of women and all that goes with that. But I'm also a pragmatist, and we all, I think, live in Devon on this call, and we have to be practical about making sure that I know as a parent, I take that responsibility seriously to make sure that my daughter doesn't hopefully ever put herself in a position that can be at risk. And I think there's an onus on parents and perhaps more support needed for parents to give them confidence to have those conversations with their children, not just their daughters, but with their sons too, alongside other educational institutions too.
And Phil, I mean, in terms of the widespread nature of these issues, I mean, I can think of a couple of recent cases that prove this is certainly an issue both in council chambers and at Westminster. What more can be done?
Well, first of all, we've got to accept there's a problem, and we cannot continue this. It's somebody else's problem. I was a bus driver. I was never trained to intervene in situations like this, and that is a silly remark that was made, to be brutally honest. What we could do with is proper funding for local government. So whereas we've had to cease supporting Devon
and keep fit, we're like a big family up there. I go 5 times a week swimming, and I'm 82.
And if it went?
I can't go anywhere, can't see, can't drive, haven't got a husband.
All options are being explored here to try and keep the town's facility afloat, including finding out how much a community takeover would cost.
I think we would want to know what we were actually looking at in the way of money, because obviously it's not going to be a cheap issue trying to raise funds to any leisure centre.
Operator GLL has told Cornwall Council Saltash is one of 4 it can't afford to keep open, along with Launceston, Weybridge and Falmouth. The council says more than 2,000 people have already responded to a public consultation, and with no decisions made, it's keen to get views.
Did you do it there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
That's
did you both learn to swim?
Yeah, that's where I learned how to swim.
And that's what the young people at this youth centre in Saltash are indeed doing via their own questionnaire.
I'd probably have to go to Liscard or like Plymouth to like the Life Centre or something.
Cornwall Council says it's really pleased with the level of interest from local communities, and it's actively working with a number of groups to find alternative solutions.